But one innovation that man created, it has not been debated so much, is that the innovation or the of money as a currency. I think this book tries to bring that out, and I'd like to request Dr. Anil Kakurkar and the other chief guests on the stage to please inaugurate the book. Vaidehi, will you please get the book?
It's going live. Oh, look at that. Sir, एक मिनट, sir.
So if you should please, release the book. I don't have the right word for it, so please put it for that. So in reality, it's not just a book, it's a Tulsi Tawari, Professor Sakhalkar, Mr. Venkatesan, distinguished members in the audience and friends. Well, first of all, I must congratulate Shri Tawari for a very, I would say, for a work which will make not only us, not only people who will read this book, but perhaps a far larger community think about this very fine balance that we need to ensure. I would call it balance of value systems. This value is a term which has been used in that book many times. We are all also familiar with value in terms of the connotation that value systems have. And I think there is a relationship between the two, and that's what I imagine that this book would set the thinking process on that aspect in motion. I must admit it was very tough for me to read this book, I must tell you. Tough because every page you read, it makes you think. And for a person like me who is not so deep in economics, I have to think even harder because I don't grasp several things. But at the same time, you want to read the next page and the next page, and every page of it will make you think. And so I must admit that I have made effort. I think I have read more than half of your book, but I haven't read full because it takes time. And that in itself, I think, for me, tells me something that this book is extremely valuable. This book is, it looks at the problems of economics, problems of development, problems of how we should look at society, society should look at us in a very fundamental way. This aspect that remember the words, but if somebody has to win, nobody has to lose. Or if somebody has to earn, nobody has to lose. I think this is very fundamental in our own ancient philosophy. The linkage between, for example, talks about the movement that is taking place towards knowledge economy, the movement which is taking place through the technology, the internet and ICT dominated world, which is empowering large number of people in a variety of ways. And so I have not gone all the way to the end, but I think you are talking about a fair bit of a ray of hope that new leadership would evolve, and that leadership perhaps would not be as exploitative as the leaderships which have, not that in all the cases, but in many cases, the way they have evolved so far. And I think it's extremely important for us to understand that from a multidisciplinary perspective, as Professor Sakalkar mentioned. There is one thing which has always been bothering me, and that is, today, for example, if you take knowledge, and there is a great linkage between knowledge and economy, knowledge and money, or the knowledge as a business activity. We all know, at least in my childhood, I was taught that knowledge is something which doesn't decrease by giving. On the other hand, it increases. Tawari has described 4 important kind of parameters in terms of something that we should have. Or he describes 3 additional parameters in addition to good health. And so it's health, it's love, it's identity, and of course it's money. Now, seen in value sense, to me value is something which doesn't decrease if you give. Love doesn't diminish if you give. Knowledge, which is not in that parameter, but knowledge doesn't diminish if you give. Money diminishes if you give, if you see it in a very limited sense. But if you treat yourself as a member of a larger family, and or seen the other way, if everyone treats himself or herself as a trustee of your own wealth, as Mahatma Gandhi has been saying, then even money doesn't decrease by giving, because it all remains within the system which you treat as your family. And so in that sense, if you talk about, and he has very nicely analyzed this aspect of creation of wealth versus transfer of wealth, and while recognizing that of course creation of wealth is the thing, we should all be endeavoring to realize that while we can't do away with money, and so we can't do away with some aspects of transfer of wealth, and the book does distinguish nicely between between the good aspects of transfer of wealth and the bad aspects of transfer of wealth. It seems to me that in a society, and of course you described a pyramid, I forget the term, but it's several attributes which are actually not so good kind of attributes, and but talk about the pyramid in terms of the economic strata, the highest wealth earning people to the people at the bottom. And as I think Muhammad Yunus had somewhere said that we should ensure I think he didn't use transfer of wealth, but if you create your transactions, if you create business activity, if you create economic activity in a manner where you actually migrate money to the bottom of pyramid, or you create wealth at the bottom of pyramid, it will still migrate, it will still transfer. But then creating money at the top of the pyramid and then that transfer taking place, which doesn't happen, and you have this so-called lot of disparities getting created in the society. On the other hand, if you create enterprise which creates wealth at the bottom of the pyramid, again it will transfer. But this actually would transfer relatively faster. This will of course create the benefit where it is most required, and in fact it will reduce the disparities in the society. Now clearly not all things can be done by organizing it such a way that there is this create wealth at the bottom of pyramid, because there are decidedly several operations where you need to run large enterprise, and so I think you probably need a good combination of both the top down and bottom up, as it were. I have been concerned with this problem for a fairly long time, and for example, we have several examples in the country, several kinds of enterprises in private sector, public sector got been created. We have also models. For example, there is this wonderful Amul model, milk cooperatives. There is this model of sugar cooperatives right here in Maharashtra, also in Uttar Pradesh. Now, and they have actually had a transformative influence on the society, but it has also created its own problems. You can't really say that the cooperative model has no exploitative elements within it. And so in fact I was quite attracted by this treatment of the issue of identity in your book. And actually I was amazed that you have this an individual identity which is so important. In fact, you begin by saying power of one, then the power of two, and then of course the larger power. We also have this model of self-help groups, microfinance going on in the country, and I think it has, in some sense, has created that individual identity to a large number of people who were absolutely at the bottom of the pyramid. But interacting with them, I find that although they have certainly things are better for them than they were before this identity was acquired by them. But that identity is not strong enough. They still have problem dealing with quote unquote banking correspondents. They still have problems in growing from where they are to larger enterprise. And in fact, one of the solutions that appears necessary is to create a combination of the individual identity and the group identity. For example, cooperatives just create that group identity and we've seen it becomes a formidable force. And in fact, I was very happy to read this in your book that you need to manage both an individual identity and a group identity, and organize the build-up of enterprise, as it were, on this basis, in a manner that you generate wealth at that level. Now, I think there are, this book is a very curious combination. On one side, it looks at things from the angles of, from an economic angle. But I would imagine that many philosophers, the way they would argue, that you see something parallel in this book in terms of how the society should conduct itself, what should be the value system in the society, how is it that if somebody gives, it's not a loss to anybody, including the giver. How is it that the value addition in whatever we do could be a solution, could be an answer, which done rightly can perhaps not go wrong, even if it may appear wrong in an economic sense. It will still have the importance of ultimately leading to something good, or the net of all the activity would be a plus. So I think there are many aspects in this book which need to be understood first, which need to be debated, discussed, and of course put into practice. And it's not going to be easy. Putting these ideas in practice always would require a fair bit of innovative thinking, innovative work. But I think if one moves in that direction, to me it would appear that the success is always guaranteed. I won't say more on this book because I'm not even sure whether, as I told you, I have not read that book fully, so I'm not even sure whether I have understood the whole thing completely, because unless you read this whole thing in. But I would certainly recommend to all of you and to your friends that this is one book which certainly is worth reading, worth understanding. It may be that some of it may not be, you may not find an agreement in all of it. I'm sure you'll find agreement in several parts of it. But even if in the first step there is no agreement, I think it's worth discussing, and I'm sure you will come to better solutions for whatever you are doing compared to the present situation. I would like to use this opportunity, since you mentioned silage, and of course that's an idea of my colleague Patankar, who is sitting there. But I'd like to speak a little about that concept. This was actually, it arose out of the spin-off activities of various developments which have been taking place at Bhabha Atomic Research Center. Essentially, those developments which have a potential role in the rural areas in terms of creating economic activity or developmental activity there. And Patankar has, in fact, tried out on a limited scale, but at a number of locations, in the form of creating activities which are self-supporting, which are sustainable on their own. You have to pump in the resources to begin with, but then it sort of, you can keep running that activity. People can earn their livelihood. So that's something which has been tried, and that's because that activity allows you value addition in the local place in a manner that the people of the local region themselves want those products. The next step which is being attempted is to create an ecosystem where you have a knowledge, call it knowledge park or knowledge center or knowledge institution, park right inside the rural area, the rural domain, but with a difference. The difference being that it's a complete knowledge domain, in the sense you have young students who come there for learning again in a holistic sense, not just what's there in the books, but also a bit of hands-on work, bit of engagement with the neighborhood society, like that. Not quite an ashram, but all elements of the ancient ashram, where whatever the students used to be put through, we provide all those elements and more, in the sense we're talking about a domain where, supposing it's a university campus, you carry out research at the cutting edge. You create environment, you create support where the best of research, world-class research can be done there. So you must be able to obviously attract scientists, researchers of that caliber, and you must create facilities for them to conduct their research. The only difference would be that the research would also have an orientation in terms of delivering something useful to the neighborhood. Or seen the other way, the different socio-economic development activities which of course one wants to promote in the neighborhood, they become laboratories for identifying problems and also laboratories for implementing the solutions. And the research oriented towards that you do in this call it a knowledge center or call it a university campus. It seems to me that there is there is exciting research possible. It can give a lot of challenge, not just from being very satisfying in terms of the quality of research one is able to do, but also very satisfying in terms of contribution to the society one can make out of that research. If you are able to do that, and on the other hand, we are able to bring in, we also have this system of financial inclusion, and we are able to bring in, so you have this neighborhood development backed by knowledge institution on one side and the financial inclusion where there is both an individual identity recognized and is at play, as well as there is a group identity is recognized and is at play. It looks to me that you can create an ecosystem where the development can proceed fairly rapidly and it can spread. And then we also have this system of the so-called Panchayati Raj. I don't want to go into how it is running, but the basic concept is that you allow the governance, you allow the planning to be done at the grassroots levels. So if you integrate all these things together, I think you can really create a model where the attributes of wealth, in which money is one part, essential, important part, as Tawari has mentioned in his book. But the wealth, which will be more in a manner where, which has a characteristics of growth by giving, and not what we know that something which diminishes by giving, and that is exactly, I think, consistent with our ancient philosophy. After all, this book it essentially talks about picking up the best from the West as well as the East or the Indians, and sort of on one side you create an independent mind, independent decision maker, independent thinker, who also recognizes the value of interdependence, who also recognizes the need for being, for emotionally being a part of a group, and not allow the group to dominate or affect the independence of the individual, and at the same time not allow the extreme notions of independence to kill the emotions all around. So that way, as the book describes, you create a best combination of the good that's there in the West and the good that we have in our own society, and a new development model. And I do hope that the debate that this book will trigger would create not only thinking in the society, but eventually would also create a leadership which would in fact carry this process further towards the logical destination, which hopefully would be good for all of us, for our country and the world at large. And so in that sense, I consider this book to be a very important contribution to the society and to humanity as a whole. So congratulations once again, and wish you all success.